Hi, welcome back. I'm going to read the fourth and final part of Black Beauty. This book was written by Anna Sewell and illustrated by Phoebe Erickson. I hope you've enjoyed the three previous parts, and the fourth part is just as exciting. Here we go. And now, Black Beauty learned that a livery stable was a place where horses and carriages were kept, where anyone who wanted to go riding could come and pay to have a horse for as long as he pleased. Always before, Black Beauty had been driven by people who knew how to drive, but now all kinds of people took him out. Some of them knew very little about horses and held the reins too tight or too loose, and others were always showing off by driving too fast. It was a hard time for Black Beauty, but he did his best. One day a man who was a good rider took a liking to him and decided to buy him. So Black Beauty had another master, Mr. Barry, a businessman. He hired a stable a short distance from his home and paid a man named Filcher to look after his horse. Filcher took good care of Black Beauty except for one thing. He didn't give him enough to eat. Black Beauty heard the master order the best of food for him, but where was it all going? Black Beauty began to grow thin. Mr. Barry rode him out to the country one day to see a friend of his who was a farmer. The farmer looked closely at Black Beauty. "What do you feed your horse?" asked the farmer. "Hay, beans, oat, and corn," said Mr. Barry. "Well, you'd better see who's eating your oats and corn," said the farmer, "for I don't think your horse is getting them." And soon Mr. Barry found out that Filcher was stealing the food and taking it home. He found another groom to take care of Black Beauty, but this man did not keep the stable clean, and on Black Beauty's feet became tender and sore from standing on dirty, wet straw. Mr. Barry was so disgusted by his groom's neglect of their work that he decided to sell his horse. And so Black Beauty was taken to a horse fair to be sold. Here he saw young horses just out of the country, shaggy little Welsh ponies no higher than his old friend Merrylegs, hundreds of hart horses, and some like himself who had had some accident, some splendid animals who looked fit for anything, and some poor old horses with all of their ribs showing. It made Black Beauty sad to see these last ones. There was a great deal of bargaining going on, and many people came to look at Black Beauty. First they would pull his mouth open and then look at his eyes, then feel his legs and skin, and then try his paces. But what a difference there was in the way those things were done! Some did them in a rough, off-hand way, while others would pass their hands gently over his body with a friendly pat now and then. There was one man Black Beauty liked right away. He kept hoping this man would buy him. He was a rather small man, but well-made and quick in his motions. His gray eyes were kind and cheerful, and he had a clean, fresh smell about him. Black Beauty could tell by the way he handled him that he was used to horses. The man offered $100 for Black Beauty, but the salesman said that was not enough. As the little man walked away, Black Beauty looked after him sadly. Then a hard-faced man came along, and he offered $100 too. Black Beauty did not like this man and hoped he would not get him for a master. In the midst of the bargaining, the little gray-eyed man came back. Black Beauty reached out his head toward him, and the man patted it. "Well, old chap," he said, "I think we suit each other." Then he spoke to the man in charge. "I'll give $110 for him." "Say $120 and you can have him." $115, said the little man, and Black Beauty's heart beat for joy when the salesman said, "All right." The new master was Jerry Barker. After a few good feed of oats, Black Beauty was on his way to London with Jerry on his back. When they reached the great city, the gas lamps were already lighted. After going through miles of streets, Jerry guided his horse into a narrow alley and pulled up in front of one of the houses. He whistled, and the door of the house flew open. Out ran a pretty young woman, followed by a little girl and a boy. They all threw their arms around Jerry as he got off his horse. "Now then, Harry, my boy, open the gate and Mother will bring us the lantern," said Jerry. The next minute they were all standing around Black Beauty in a small stable yard. "Is he gentle, Father?" asked the little girl. "Yes, Dolly, as gentle as your kitten. Come and pat him." Dolly's little hand reached out to pat Black Beauty's shoulder. How good it felt! Then he was led into a clean and comfortable stable and given plenty of dry straw. After a good supper, he lay down to sleep, feeling that he was going to be happy again. Jerry Barker, the new master, was a cab driver. Excuse me. His wife, Polly, was a plump little woman with smooth dark hair, dark eyes, and a smiling mouth. Harry was nearly 12, tall and good-natured. 8-year-old Dolly was just like her mother. The morning after Black Beauty went to live at the Barkers, Polly and Dolly came out to the yard to make friends. Harry had been there since early morning, helping his father to groom the new horse, and he had already said Black Beauty was a regular brick. Polly brought an apple, and Dolly had a piece of bread. It was a great treat for Black Beauty to be petted again and talked to in a gentle voice, and he let them see as well as he could that he wanted to be friendly. That afternoon, Jerry made sure the collar and bridle fitted comfortably, and then Black Beauty was hitched to the cab. For the first few days, he found his new work very hard. He was not used to London, and the rush and the noise of traffic worried him. But he soon found out that he could trust Jerry, and that made things easier. Jerry was a fine man as well as a fine driver. He never used a whip on Black Beauty. He gave him plenty of food and water, cleaned the stable well, and saw to it that Sunday was a day of rest for his horse as well as for himself. Jerry liked to make up little songs to sing to himself. One he was fond of was this: "Come, father and mother, and sister and brother, come all of you, turn and help one another." I just made that up, the tune of that. When he was driving his cab, Jerry was just as cheerful and kind, but he would never make Black Beauty go too fast just because someone was impatient. Sometimes, if a passenger was anxious to get somewhere in a hurry and had good reason, Jerry would say to Black Beauty, "Come on, my boy, we'll show them how we can get over the ground." And then they would go like the wind. On a cold wintry days, Dolly would come to the cab stand with some hot soup or pudding for her father. But at Christmas time, Jerry and his horse were kept so busy that there was scarcely ever time for them to stop for something to eat. On New Year's Eve, they had to take 2 men to a party at 9 o'clock. "Come back at 11, said one of them. "You may have to wait a few minutes, but don't be late." Promptly at 11 o'clock, Jerry and Black Beauty were back at the house where they had left the men, but they had to wait and wait out in the cold. For 2 hours and a half they waited. By the time the passengers finally came out to the cab, Jerry was coughing, and Black Beauty's legs were so numb that he almost stumbled, but he managed to pull the carriage up until the men were taken home, and he and Jerry were back at their own stable. Jerry was coughing so hard he could hardly speak. Polly came out with a lantern. "Can't I do something?" she asked anxiously. "Yes," said Jerry in a hoarse voice. "Give this poor creature something warm, and then please make me some hot soup." Jerry took time for the usual rub-down and even went up to the hayloft for an extra bundle of straw for Black Beauty's bed. Polly brought a warm mash for the hungry and tired horse, and then she and Jerry went off into the house. The next morning it was Harry who came to clean the stable. Black Beauty wondered where Jerry was. At noon, Dolly came with Harry to give the horse his food and water. Dolly was crying, and from their talk, Black Beauty learned that Jerry was dangerously sick. Many days passed before he began to get better, and then the doctor said he was not strong enough to be a cab driver any longer. It was arranged that the Barker family should move to the country, where Jerry would have a good job as a coachman. This was very sad news for Black Beauty, though, for it meant he would be sold again. "I wish we could take you with us," whispered Polly when she and the children came to say goodbye to the horse. She and Dolly put their faces close to his neck and kissed him. Harry said nothing, but stood there sadly, petting him. Black Beauty's next master, Nicholas Skinner, was a cab driver, but altogether different from Jerry Barker. There was never any rest for his horses, and Mr. Skinner was always ready to use a whip. Poor Black Beauty! He was so tired that he wished he could drop down dead, and one day his wish almost came true. Mr. Skinner had taken him to the railroad station to meet a train. There were 4 passengers in the party that climbed into Skinner's cab, and they piled so much baggage on top that Black Beauty, already hungry and tired, could hardly pull the cab. He managed somehow until he came to a steep hill, but the heavy load was too much for him. Mr. Skinner was using the whip, and Black Beauty was trying his best, when suddenly his feet slipped from under him and he fell heavily to the ground. As he lay there, he could hear voices saying, "The poor horse, he's dead, he'll never get up again." Then somebody threw cold water on his head, poured medicine into his mouth, and covered him with a blanket. After a while, he felt a little stronger. He staggered to his feet and was led to a stable where a warm drink was brought to him. He drank it gratefully. By evening, Black Beauty was able to go back to Skinner's stable, and the horse doctor came to see him. "If he could have 6 months' rest, he'd be of some use again," said the horse doctor. "But he has been worked too hard, and there isn't any strength left in him." "I can't afford to let him rest that long," said Mr. Skinner in his rough way. "Well," said the doctor, "there's going to be a sale of horses in about 10 days. Feed him well and let him rest till the sale, and you might get something for him." So once again Black Beauty went to a horse sale, holding up his head and hoping for the best. Some of the people who came to examine him looked not much better off than the poor horses they were bargaining about. Then Black Beauty noticed a nice-looking farmer with a little boy. The farmer was wearing a broad-brimmed hat, and beneath it a round, ruddy face shone out kindly. "There's a horse, Willie, that has known better days," said the farmer, reaching out his hand to pat Black Beauty. And Black Beauty pushed his nose forward as if in answer to this kindness. "Poor old fellow," said Willie, stroking Black Beauty's face. "See, grandfather, how well he understands kindness. Oh, grandfather, please buy him and make him well again." The farmer could not make up his mind right away, but Willie kept on talking about Black Beauty's good points until finally the old man paid $25 for the horse and took him home. Mr. Thoroughgood was the farmer's name. He and his grandson Willie came every day to see how Black Beauty was getting along in the pleasant meadow where he was turned loose. The perfect rest, the good food, the soft grass, and gentle exercise soon began to tell on Black Beauty's condition and spirits, and by the next spring his legs had improved so much that he seemed quite young again. Mr. Thoroughgood and Willie tried him out one day in the carriage and were much pleased with him. Black Beauty did so well that the farmer decided to find a good home for him. Early in the summer, there came a day when Black Beauty was cleaned with special care and taken to a pretty little house a mile or 2 from the village. Excuse me. "I hope the ladies will like him," said Mr. Thoroughgood. "Oh, I hope so too," said Willie, "because this would be such a good home for him, and I could come to see him often." Then 3 ladies came out to look at the horse. They decided to keep him on trial. "If you don't like him, send him back to me," said Mr. Thoroughgood. Black Beauty was taken to a comfortable stable, fed, and left to himself. The next day, when the groom was cleaning his face, he said, "This is just like the star that Black Beauty had. I wonder where he is now." A little farther on he came to a small scar on the horse's neck. The groom looked surprised. He went over Black Beauty carefully, talking to himself. White star in his forehead, 1 white foot, this little scar. Then, looking at the middle of the horse's back, and here's that little white patch of hair. It must be Black Beauty. "Oh, Beauty, Beauty, do you remember me? Little Joe Green, who almost killed you?" And he began patting the horse all over. Black Beauty couldn't really remember him, for Joe had grown up and now had black whiskers and a deep voice. But Black Beauty put his nose up to him as if to say they were friends. "I wonder who broke your knees, old Beauty," said Joe. "You must have had a bad time of it somewhere, but you're going to have good times now. I wish John were here to see you." The ladies were just as pleased as Joe when he told them he was sure their horse was Squire Gordon's Black Beauty. "I'll write to Mr. Gordon," said one of the sisters. "How glad she will be to know that her favorite horse has come to us." And so Black Beauty found a happy home. The ladies liked him so well that they promised never to sell him. Since his work was pleasant and easy, his strength and spirits all came back again. Joe Green was the best and kindest of grooms, and Willie came to see him often. His troubles were over, and he was at home. Often, before he was quite awake, he imagined he was still in the orchard at Birtwick, standing with his old friends under the apple tree. That's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed Black Beauty as much as I enjoyed reading it to you. Bye-bye.